Welcome back to another video slash live stream. Welcome back to the Project Freedom Podcast, guys. And I have Ryan from Elevate Cyber up with me again. And Ryan, how are you doing, my friend?
Yeah, doing pretty good. Just came back from the great state of Florida
How,
yesterday, actually.
how did you like your trip here? How you doing, my friend?
Oh man, I love St. Petersburg. We were there for a couple days, and then I visited my dad in Jacksonville as well. But man, their downtown is super nice. Nothing like Austin, where I'm constantly getting like swarmed by like sketchy people all the time. But I was surprised. I went downtown, and it's like their downtown is super walkable. They got all these like bars and stuff in a close area, and we parked like right downtown in a parking garage for about we were there like 3 or 4 hours, and it was only $1 to park
A
like
dollar?
on a Thursday. I was
Really?
like, yeah, like in Austin, it would easily be like at least $7, 7, 8 bucks.
This in Jacksonville?
No, St. Pete.
Oh, okay. I was
Yeah,
about to say, yeah, dude, you can't even find a place here that's $1 for less than like 20 minutes.
I
So
bet.
good luck on that. All right, dude. So shall we get into it? So guys, if you guys have been following and know Ryan over there at his channel Elevate Cyber, and your name should be tagged, or your channel's name should be tagged in the title, but I set it up through StreamYard. So if not, it will be tagged after the video is over, guys. You guys can check his channel out. Ryan, guys, he's a cybersecurity expert. He spent a numerous amount of time in the field, and like Ryan, so one thing people were asking me is like, what is the exact difference between someone that is a software developer and someone that is, for example, like a pen tester, someone that's in cybersecurity versus someone that writes code? What would you say is like a strong difference between the two?
Yeah. So I mean, the main difference really is like, what is your product? I would say, like, if you want to break it down to the most simple difference, right? As a programmer, right, your product is the code that you write, the code that you
Yep.
produce. In cybersecurity, well, I guess it really depends, because even cybersecurity is super broad in terms of just how different the jobs can be. But specifically, what I do as a penetration tester, my product is the penetration test report that I create that has a summary of all the findings, all the security issues that I've found on an assessment. That's my product. Now, in doing that, I might use some code. I might write some code, and that can assist me in my testing. But at the end of the day, my product is the report, whereas for a programmer, it's your code.
Right. So would you say that this is correct? A software developer or a software engineer, their primary concern is like building some kind of application and or software, even if it's like a script or something like that, right? To give to somebody as the product. And your product is more of like either A, offensive in nature, or B, defensive in nature. And I guess your field, you could go so far as to say like you can hire people in cybersecurity that are sitting there on standby to make sure that there is no offensive attack onto your system, right? So it's pretty important, right?
Oh yeah, for sure. And I would say one metric that I've heard constantly, and working in the field, I would say this is pretty accurate, is that about 80% of the cybersecurity jobs are on the defensive side. So they're what we call blue team jobs. And it's
Okay.
basically, there's a bunch of different ones, obviously, but essentially it's what you described, where you do have the people that are monitoring the network as well, looking for anything that stands out as like, malicious, or any kind of indication that the network has been compromised or anything like that. Which is also where, on the offensive side, some of the red teaming stuff can come into play. Where if you're a red teamer, which is what I started doing now as well, is I'm simulating an adversary. So I'm simulating, like, if you think of the different hacking groups out there, like Russian hackers, Chinese hackers, stuff like that, right? There's what are called advanced persistent threat actors, and they're all classified under a certain like code name or like letter, acronym, whatever, right? And usually, as a red teamer, the organization will tell you, we want you to emulate APT, whatever, right? Like a certain specific threat actor. And so you can go, there's like websites you could go to where you can see like what are the assets that they've went after in the past, what tools did they use? Like, you could get pretty granular with it. And a lot of times in those types of engagements, we're actually trying to emulate that group. And the reason that's a benefit to the business as a whole is they want to test and see, like, okay, if we got targeted by this threat actor, how prepared would we be? How quickly and efficiently could we lock things down? What would be the damage done if they decided to target us? So that's the value that they're getting. But while that's happening, there's the blue team that's monitoring the network and incident response and all that. They're trying to prevent us from being able to do that, or trying to detect us, essentially. So there's a lot of moving parts to this.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So my assessment was, I guess, somewhat accurate. You just said something about you might sometimes use a little bit of code. I want to get into that in a second, but let me check out with the chat real quick here. Harry Zico says this is going to be a good one. What up, Harry? Good to see you.
Yo,
Sam
Harry.
saying yes in the house yet again. Cody Moose, the usual. And New Horizons says, hola, gentlemen. And New Horizons has a question for you. He says, do you pen test on 1FS? LOL. I don't know. Is that a serious? What 1FS? That's like a file. That's like a networked file system, right?
It sounds like it, but I'm not too familiar with it.
I don't know. New Horizons. I don't think we can give you a stern answer.
Oh, okay,
on
it's
that.
an Isilon system. I mean, I don't personally, but I mean, anytime you can go after where data is stored, that's obviously valuable. So I mean, yeah, if you're going after, if you're on an engagement or something and you're able to get a hold of the data, no matter where it is, then yeah, having knowledge. I mean, essentially, that's the nice thing about IT, right? If you learn IT stuff, it's always going to help you in cybersecurity, because just the more things that you're knowledgeable on, that's the more value they can provide. So if you're learning it right now, then yeah, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, it's true, and that kind of coincides with the whole learn how to problem solve and troubleshoot thing that you and me are always pretty big on, right?
Yeah.
Baker says, hello, guys. Christian Soto also says, good evening. All right. So back to the question about, you said that sometimes you might use a little bit of code. Could you elaborate maybe on how much and how often someone in your position and maybe your field in broad will actually either A, write code, or B, have to like maybe go and like look at some code?
Yeah. So, I mean, it varies depending on what you do within cybersecurity, obviously. I'll give you a few examples. So, if you're on the offensive side, as I am, then most of what you're going to be doing is, well, two things really. One is, of course, writing short scripts, the things that you might only even use once in some cases, but would greatly, simplify things for you in an assessment. That's one. But the other way you're going to use code a lot is you're going to really be reading a lot of code, because if you're running exploits and stuff like that, that's typically, code that someone has written. I mean, it's always code that's been written, right? And so what would separate someone that's what we would call in the field a script kiddie from someone that's not is someone that's able to look at that exploit, understand what it's doing, and sometimes you need to make some modifications to it. So, for example, just a very simple example, if I have a web exploit and it's targeting a certain URL, maybe the application that I'm dealing with, there's another folder in that URL because they named it something differently than the default. So in that case, if I couldn't modify that code and make that change, then I couldn't run that exploit. So that is, the short little modifications and understanding what code's doing is really important. Also, from the perspective of, protecting yourself, right? Because, some exploits you might encounter out there might actually hack you when you run it. Those do exist out there as well. So especially if you're going to play around with cybersecurity stuff, it's going to be really helpful to understand the code, even, if only, to protect yourself online out there. Now, if you are on the blue team side, you're doing the defense stuff, right? A lot of times they're looking at tons and tons of log files. And so for them, scripting is even more important because they have to be able to parse through that data and do, be able to interpret it. And without code, that'd be next to impossible in a lot of cases.
Okay. So I guess you could say that knowing at least the fundamentals of programming can severely help you, right? But it's not so much so the case that you have to be sitting around writing code all day, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that everyone in the field should have like some level of code knowledge, but yeah, the more that you have, that's only going to be a benefit to you for sure.
Okay, well, what about the inverse? What about if you're a dev? Um, how much would it benefit you if you're a dev to know like the basics of cybersecurity to either a maybe let's just say build more secure software, or b not get yourself in a situation to where maybe if you're inheriting some software from someone else that you're working on, that if there are some kind of flaws in it, you can be able to adjust that. Like how important do you think that would be?
Yeah, I don't know if we talked about this on the channel last time, but I mean, I was talking to my manager the other day, and we are just recounting our previous experiences at other companies, and they're large companies that we both worked for, and all these places you would think they'd be so secure, you'd think they'd have such at least a well established security system in place of like
Not
people
so
that are
much,
like
right?
knowledgeable. At least, if you're working for example, a Fortune 100 company, you would think that, okay, all those developers have at least some security knowledge, right? They have a security team, that is well established, right? The security people on the team know what they're doing, right? But a lot of times that's not the case. And it is pretty alarming. But yeah, that's the reason that you constantly see all these breaches happening all the time. And I mean, same thing with Web3 as well. You're seeing a lot of projects get hacked and all of that stuff. So it's very rare that if you look at if you try to learn programming yourself, and you look at the resources that are out there, it's almost always like, how do I build this thing? And then that's it. Like
Yeah,
once it's
yeah.
working, you move on, right? There's almost never any even thought about, well, how can I code this securely and stuff like that. And what I've noticed from, the other side, from the security side, is that a lot of, most of the time I am working with developers that have very little to no knowledge of the security stuff. And what ends up happening is that they end up being really tight on their deadlines or even running behind because they have to get security approval to move forward because they can't go into production with some, major vulnerabilities, right? And it ends up being like a lot of back and forth, and all that could have been prevented if they just had at least a basic level of knowledge, because a lot of times they have very, like, not even the foundation of knowledge. So even if you learn a little bit of it, it's going to go a long way. And definitely the best teams that I've worked with are the teams that have that understanding.
Yeah, I think I agree with you, and I think last time we talked about how we were telling the audience how a lot of these large companies, their security and well, really, their all their IT infrastructure for that matter is just not up to par. And I don't know if we mentioned Colonial Pipeline last time, but to me, I think that's a pretty important example right there, right? Because I mean, come on, like how do you have software and IT infrastructure that if I don't, and I know you and me talked about it like the day that it happened, the day after, but um, that was kind of an avoidable situation too. And then that leads to the social engineering part, but that's I think we can hit that another time. I got another question for you over here. He New Horizons asks, are devs on the blue team or is that another tester?
So they're not really testers. They're within cybersecurity, so not developers. When I say blue team, I mean, just to name a few of the roles there, just to give you guys a way to contextualize it, is that you obviously have like your what you call SOC analysts, and what they do is they that's like security operations center. So there's like a whole umbrella security operations center, and there's people that monitor, like, say, the network traffic. There's people that monitor different things,
Like the knock?
Yeah, I think so. But yeah, they basically, I've never worked on the blue team side, so my knowledge is a little bit limited, but I can tell you for sure that there's people that are monitoring the network and stuff like that. And there's people that are incident responders. So once an incident is reported, then they go in and they try to see what was done. Like, what did they touch? What did they, take or whatever. And, you have people that, will go in after a breach, right, and try to track down what are called threat hunters. They try to hunt down the hackers, which is a pretty cool job, I think, as well.
Sounds fun.
Yeah, so the people that are into like computer forensics and stuff like that, they try to track back like and see like what servers they were coming from and stuff like that, and try to track down the hackers. But yeah, developers are more what they're going to be involved in is more in penetration testing, not really with red teaming. So where developers would come into play is that, they're just trying to go live in production and have their app be secure. And then a penetration tester will just look for as many vulnerabilities as possible in their application and report it back to them.
Okay. Max Nitas in the house says continue the black swans. I think he's talking about Bitcoin. Anna V says, go hack yourself. Open my eyes to how vulnerable I am getting hacked and need to get better at secure coding. Go hack yourself. Is that a book?
Oh, I guess it is.
He has it in quotes. Anna, if you could clarify that, we can Google it. Max Nitas in the house with the $30,184.
Actually, sir, on the chart that I'm looking at, I don't know what chart you're looking at, Max. My chart says $30,104.
So not that $80 difference. I'm looking at Coinbase though. We hit 29K on Coinbase. Yeah, that's going to be the stream topic about probably Wednesday. Anna says, yes, it's a book. It's a book. Okay, you have to check that out. Me and Ryan will probably both check that out. Okay, so Ryan, I don't know if you weren't in the webinar, you weren't in the DVD webinar last night, but this is something that I've been talking about in a previous stream from last week. And I said, essentially, if I were to start over again, here's what I would do. Here's what I would do differently, blah, blah, blah. As for me and myself, and I prefaced that video like, hey, this is me and myself saying what I would do specifically. And then in a webinar that we had last night, one of my clients, he was like, hey, this other guy on YouTube said that if he were to start over again, he would start with Solidity. And I think he might have misunderstood what I was saying and what the other guy was saying too, because it brings me back to the whole just learn to code thing. Like, there's no need to say, I need to start with this language or this language or this language or this language, because let's just say you start with Solidity or you don't. Let's say you start with JavaScript or you start with pink, purple, polka dotted language. Okay, whatever the coolest, most trendy language is. Either way, you have to learn how to code, right? Because if you can't code, well, then you're not going to code. But this has been a topic that I think has been like, I guess, like trending in the last like couple weeks or so, because some other channels I saw doing videos on that as well. So what would you do, Ryan, if you had to start all over again in the same career? And is it the same? Would you say it's the same with the software development side, where like, hey, you have to kind of learn these fundamentals before you just start going in one of kind of area, or rather, you have to focus on learning the fundamentals first instead of focus on learning a certain kind of area. Not that if you were to focus on or start with that area that you couldn't use that area to learn the fundamentals, but what would you say is that a similar case? And then also, what would you do differently if you could start over again?
So when you say area, are you talking pen testing or cybersecurity?
Cybersecurity in general.
Ooh, okay. Yeah, see,
would you
that's
still
pretty
do pen
tricky
testing?
because there's so many different things you can do in cybersecurity that are way different than each other. Like you could just do risk analysis and you'd be in cybersecurity, which when I was going to college, I did get to explore a bunch of different ones, and then I like pen testing the best. So it is kind of tough to say because I didn't even know that this was possible. I think at least a lot of viewers on this channel, they knew that you could become a developer, that you could become a programmer, and you could get paid to do that. But I think a lot of people don't even realize that you can hack stuff and get paid to do that. But the basic answer I would say is that, if I had to do it all over again, knowing what I know now of that I can do it, first of all, right? There's a little bit of debate if I would ever have even known, because the reason that I even discovered it in the first place was my roommate, freshman year that I just happened to get placed with was in cybersecurity. And I was like, wait, you can do this, you can hack and all this stuff. But yeah, if I knew all of that, then definitely what I would have done was just learned it pretty much, through a mentor or something like that. And is just online basically, because I will say that without a doubt, about 98%, 98 to 99% of what I've learned was like on the internet, as opposed to in the classroom for pen testing. The only thing that, like I said, the only thing that was really good about going to college was I got a rough idea on what some of the jobs were like, but not really even, because even those were like not really very like they would be on an actual job from what I've heard. And I will say that even the pen testing stuff that I did in college, one class for like a week, that's not very realistic to what I do. Yeah. But if anything, it gave me the biggest benefit was it let me know that I can do this as it's an option. But aside from that, yeah, I wouldn't have went the college route. I would have learned on my own. And nowadays it's easier than ever because, and probably the same with programming as well. There's so many resources out there to learn. And so many people are so caught up in books and stuff like that. And I'm not saying don't read books ever, but there's so many better mediums to assist you now than books for programming and cybersecurity. There's so many online platforms out there, ways that you can get a lot more hands-on rather than just reading theory. The worst thing you can do, whether it's when you're trying to learn programming or cybersecurity, is just to read something out of a book and just go page by page and not actually try anything yourself, which is exactly how they teach you in school, basically, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that that's the case. But yeah, dude, no, it's never been easier ever, literally ever, to learn anything from the internet, especially when you have like communities and people behind you and all kinds of different, all kinds of different venues. New Horizon says, do you have any good resources a dev could use to be mindful of to start building aware of better code?
I guess he's talking about like writing secure code and stuff like that. Yeah.
He's in my group. He doesn't know what's I don't think he knows what's coming up soon. So.
Yeah, no problem. I will say that the one that I reference the most and send to developers, we normally reference it in the report, is a site called OWASP, the Open Web Application Security Project, I believe it's called. You just go on their site. They have what's called the OWASP Top 10. It'll show you the top 10 most common web vulnerabilities, and it'll give you recommendations on how to prevent them. So I would say that'd be an excellent reference, excellent resource.
Solid. Yeah, New Horizons. Just wait a couple weeks, my friend. You'll get news of something good. A Bowl of Stew says, wow, what a great name. What a great name. Says, I learned to code with the language processing. Not a very useful language outside of game jams, but it taught me to code. It doesn't matter what language you learn first. Yeah, I mean, this guy gets it. That's point blank. Like, it's the truth. You instead of learning like, oh, I need to go learn this language because of this or that, it really doesn't matter, guys. And there are some languages that obviously it's going to be easier for most people to learn than other languages. But at the end of the day, you got to learn the fundamentals of programming. And either way, no matter what language you're using, you're going to have to learn that when you're learning that language. So,
no, man, you got to learn C first. And thank God it exists, or no one would know how to code because C wouldn't exist. And you have to learn C first to be able to program.
This is true, right? This is true. What about, man, well, C is pretty old, but not as old as Fortran, right? Or COBOL, something like that.
Yeah.
No Starch Press. ESCA says, any tips for negotiating entry-level salary? Okay, so as far as like, and Ryan, correct me if I'm wrong, because I don't know if he's talking about cybersecurity or software engineering or just IT in general. If it's like entry-level salary, first of all, you got to be realistic. Okay, like don't go in there and if they're offering you like $90,000 a year and you're like, no, I'm only going to take 150. Like, you got to be realistic, because what you guys have to take into, and I want everyone to take this into consideration for just their first job. Okay, when you're getting paid for your first job, yes, you might be getting paid less than what you would be getting paid 1, 2, 3, or 4 years later down the road, right? But you're getting paid more than just that salary. If it's your first legitimate, real big boy job, like an official, you're a W-2 employee, or even if you're a 1099, you're getting paid in the back end by being allowed to put that on your resume, and then also getting the experience. And that into some places, you're going to get better experience than others, but 9 out of 10 times, most places that you're getting that experience, that's an amount of money that you can't even put a dollar amount. You couldn't give a dollar value. So I want everyone to take that into consideration. But to give like a better answer for that question, you got to do research on the company beforehand, okay? And you got to be able to at least go on like Glassdoors, go on Google, look around and go and see what like the ranges of the salaries are at these companies, so you have a general idea. Okay, and keep that in mind too, because these are just going to be like general. But once you have that in mind, then when you go into the interview and let's say they're willing to accept you, and then you get to the part where you're discussing this kind of stuff, you want to be in the beginning stages. You want to be giving them a range, and let's just say you want exactly 100K. Like you would give them a range, and 100K would basically be in the middle of that range. So you tell them like, I'm looking to get anywhere between $90,000 to $110,000 because that's what I feel that that this job in this area that does this is about worth, right? And then from there, you also have to realize this. If it is your first job, your amount of wiggle room is going to be a little bit less, but you're always going to have a few $1,000s wiggle room no matter what. So if they already like you and they're willing to give you a job offer, they're not going to throw you out the door if you're like, I need this extra $2,000 a year because like, I don't know, I have a pony farm and I have to buy the extra hay to feed my ponies. And if I can't feed my ponies, well, then I won't be able to be a good developer or a pen tester because I'll just be at work miserable all the time. So I hope that helped. New Horizon says, you mentioned the collab before. Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, there you go, New Horizons. There you go. Bullis2 says, last time you guys talked about doing a course together. Any more news about that? Yeah. So you can go. I don't know if you sign up if you've been to DD's website, developerdirection.com email list, and just go ahead and sign up for that. You'll know when it's coming out. But I mean, already told them, Ryan, we might as well. We're gonna open it up on May 26th, guys. That's when we're gonna be opening it up. So can't do anything about that until May 26th. But when it comes, you guys can go ahead, and you guys are gonna get emails beforehand. So
yeah, just going back real quick to the junior level job thing. That's pretty much exactly what I did when I started. I got my first job. I was making less than 60K. And now, like,
how much you making now? Well, you don't have to tell them, but
6 years later, I'll just say I'm making more than triple that now.
Yep.
Yeah. So I wouldn't worry about the salary as much. What's more important is, like Josh said, getting the experience. And if anything, if there's anything you wanna dig into, it's like, are they gonna pay for training and stuff like that? Are there people there that you can learn from, or are you like the only developer, right? If there's other developers, then you can surround yourself with them. There's probably people on the team that have more experience than you, and that's going to help you a lot as well. And that's experience that you wouldn't get if you were just, coding on your own.
Yeah, man. And I don't know, I don't think I've talked about this on like air before, but I know I've said it in one of my webinars. My first company is a company that people consider, and they call themselves this, dude, which is like, I can't believe they say this, but they call themselves the Google of Mississippi. So basically everyone from my college that graduates there, like the two founders of the company went to my college. The CEO, the current CEO, and the last like 5 CEOs went to my college, and like 90% of the people that work there went to my college. And even if you didn't go to my college, and you work there, it's considered like when people see that on your resume, they're like, ooh, distinguished. So they're willing to pay. People are willing to work at those places like that, especially in the beginning for their first job. They don't even care what they're getting paid. They're like, I get to put that on my resume, and that's something I think people should consider too, because like, I mean, hey, like you get a job at Apple or Google or something like that. Maybe you're going to get paid like $150,000 for your entry level job, and not the $170,000 that you wanted to get. Like, well, boo fucking who, dude? Like you got to put Apple on your resume. That's about like as good as it gets, right? Alex Contazzo says, "Hey Josh and Ryan, damn late, arrived. Psyched for this. What's up, Alex? Good to see you." And yeah, guys,
good to see Alex again. He's always popping in on my channel as well.
Here's the link, guys. That's in the chat. Bullis2 says C++ is better than C. Good grief. We're on the C train now. Harry McGuire Jr. says, bro, am I starting to see more on-site? He says, bro, I'm starting to see more on-site IT jobs. Why? I haven't seen that, Harry. But I mean, it could. I'll tell you what. Depending on what state it's in, and I think there's a few states that I could say like that state's probably going to have more on-site IT jobs. That's got a lot to do with the real estate market, my friend, because some of these companies, they're in like 10 to 15 year leases with their building, and
Yeah.
they can't get out of it. And so now that everyone's at home and not working in the building, they're still stuck paying for that building. They're like, well, crap.
Well, now I think most of the companies that wanted to do the on-site thing are back to the office. I know like my company is like that, but my team has always been remote. So like we've never been required to be in an office. My team's like all over the place. But I know some people that work for my same company, they're in the office depending on what they do. So sometimes the IT jobs, it kind of depends on what your job is. Some of them, most of them are pretty friendly to do remote, but there might be a few niche ones that where they want you there. But of course, there's always going to be those companies that are going to cling to the old ways of doing stuff. You know, just like if you go the non-conventional route and you don't get a degree, there's some companies that won't hire you because you don't have a degree. But you know what? It doesn't really matter because there's so many that will overlook that if you have the skill and will hire you without a college degree, just as there's so many full remote jobs that you can find out there in IT. And going back to what we were saying earlier on the if it's your first job thing, I would say, you know, if you want to get a remote job one day, if that's like a big goal for you and you're not finding that as your first job, I would say be willing to take the on-site one even just for a little bit of time. I mean, when I took my first job, I only worked there for a year and a half before I jumped over to the security team within the same company. So don't think you have to do it forever either, but yeah, I would be a little bit more flexible on the first job. I know Harry's like looking for his first, that's why I brought it up.
Yeah, Aurelian was that way too. He was like, for him, it was like one of those things that it was a non-negotiable, like it had to be remote. And then a month or two into him looking, he started to think that he was never going to get one. And he was like, well, you know, if I actually found one that was remote, I would consider it. And I was like, dude, that it would be worth it. Like you just 12 months later, you would just leave.
Yeah.
Luckily, he did get one, or he did get a remote one. But yeah, Max Anitas, and he's touching on the how to negotiate for your first job. He says get multiple offers from different companies. That is the one thing that you can do for your first job if you're an entry level that will actually give you guys some power over like and you can tell them that too. You don't have to tell them in a mean way. You don't have to be like, oh, I have 3 offers that are so much more than you. You can just tell them like, yeah. And actually, guys, I'll tell you, I'll make this story short real quick, but out of personal experience, I've been in that situation several times. And the last time that I was in that situation, I just straight up told the company that I liked the most, who wasn't giving me the maximum amount of money in the offer. I just told them they were at like a $6,000 difference from what this other company was giving me. And I just straight up told them, I was like, listen, one of the other companies that I'm applying to, they ended up giving me an offer, and it's the exact amount of money that I want, and there's like a $6,000 difference between them and y'all. And I actually prefer you guys. I'd rather work for you guys. So if that's all that I ask, could you guys just do that? And they're like, yeah, no problem at all. So yeah, Max, thanks for the tip. The cool kids only code in assembly, I hear. This is also true. Aurelian codes and zeros and ones. All hail Aurelian in the chat. Okay, so we talked about the benefits of someone who's a developer knowing some cybersecurity, and then the inverse, right? Knowing some code if you are in the cybersecurity industry, period. Talked about what you would do. Talked about you would do differently if you were to do it all over again. I wanted to ask, would you still, if you knew, let's just assume that you knew that this field was a thing, would you still do pen testing, or would you maybe take a different route in cybersecurity?
Oh no, pen testing without a doubt. I love what I do. It's like the coolest thing in my opinion.
What about it is the most interesting to you?
Specifically, I would say the red teaming stuff I find really interesting, but just the fact that I think the fact that honestly that you can, there's no other scenario that I could ever do this legally. You know, it's pretty crazy that you can do it legally, but at the same time, it makes sense because of the benefits that the company's getting, right? You don't want to ship software that has security vulnerabilities in it, right? And how else would you know that unless you had someone looking for it, testing for it? I mean, a lot of people think that, you know, tools are like some kind of magic fix, right? But there's so many vulnerabilities that tools can't find. And that's where having like an actual person test it comes into play. And I think it'll definitely always be that way because there are so many. Another thing I love about the field is there's so many just really clever hacks. Like a lot of the exploits and stuff like that are ways you're taking something that was intended to be used a certain way, by the developer, and you are doing something with it that they never even thought was possible. They never even thought to consider that use case of the tool that they created, for example. There's so many exploits like that, and it's really interesting because you typically IT and stuff is a very logical space, but you can also see some of the creativity shine through in that as well, which I think is really interesting.
It reminds me of like the one time someone on a QA team, we built the UI for a web application, and we were like, oh dude, this thing's solid. It doesn't even need to be tested. Typical developer thinking that their stuff doesn't need to be tested. And they go in there and they like break it. We don't even know how the hell they broke it because they didn't use their mouse or type on anything that wasn't supposed to be typed on, but found a way how to do that. So but yeah, dude, I think it's funny because you're like, it's just the one time that you get the chance to do something like that. And it's in like it's like in the legal context. It's not illegal when you're doing it for an actual job, right?
Yeah.
Kind of like the top speed tester of a car when they have a car and they're like, hey, we gotta go test the top speed. That's the one time it's legal to take a car at 200 miles per hour.
And especially with like the red teaming stuff, how you can get into social engineering, like you can literally fish people in your company.
You have to, right?
You can, yeah. If you're doing an engagement, and you need a way in, because a lot of times in those engagements, you start from the outsider, right? If you're going to simulate a threat actor, usually they have you start from the outside. Sometimes they'll give you credentials if they're just like, yeah, we know you're going to get in eventually anyway, so let's just make this more cost effective for us and just give you credentials to start with. But a lot of times, you start from the outside and you can actually run phishing campaigns and you could social engineer people and do all kinds of crazy stuff. So it's like in no other circumstance could I ever do that legally.
That was the part of IT that I found the most fascinating when I was in college, because I was like super into Kevin Mitnick and all that. Okay, so Harry says, is the course the usual 4 weeks? It's going to be 5 weeks, Harry. It's going to be 5 because we can't fit all that in just 4. Max says, people work at the big 4 consulting firms for peanuts and shit hours. They do it for the resume line. It's true. It's true. A bowl of stew has a question for you. He says, Elevate Cyber, do you teach how to negotiate prices for bug bounties?
I'm not a bug bounty guy myself, but what I will say is that, I mean, maybe if you probably looked into bounties before, so you might already know this, but for those of you that don't, as far as getting the most amount of money off a bug bounty, it's always the most important to show the impact of the vulnerability as best as you can. So exactly. So if you find a security issue, remember, you got to assume that the people that are reading the report are like the people that work for the company. You want to assume that they have little security knowledge. Now, they probably have a triager that has some security knowledge, but you gotta really make them understand what is the impact. Like, what is if they don't fix this vulnerability, what's the worst that could happen to them? You really want to drive that home the most, because if they see like that, if they don't fix this, then it's going to cost them, a ton of money, then they're going to be willing to pay you a ton of money, right? So where I see people go wrong, for example, with cross-site scripting, just to give you an example, right? Maybe they just pop an alert box, on the screen, a JavaScript window alert, right? Instead of that, you want to try to use the JavaScript payload to do something, without going, beyond what's in scope and what you're allowed to do, of course, but, have it actually do something. Have your payload actually do something that they wouldn't want, a malicious attacker to do. And then you can basically better demonstrate the impact. So as far as you can legally take it is how far you want to take it for a bug bounty, for sure.
Yeah, it's a good point. The more that you can demonstrate that it's going to be like a larger impact for them, they need to get it fixed. One, that's gonna pressure them to fix it faster, and 2, it makes it more valuable for you to fix.
Yeah, and that's the same thing on the job too. If you're writing a pen test report, you find some issues, you really want to take it as far as you can so that the developers will understand, the business will understand what is the impact of the vulnerability. Because if you don't present it, because realistically, that's what could happen, right? Realistically, an attacker is going to take it as far as he can take it, right?
Oh yeah, dude. We've seen that, right?
Exactly. All the time. So if the business doesn't understand that, they're going to end up shipping that code into production, and then, if it does get exploited, then that's going to be awful for everyone, right? So
yeah, like as if like there's some kind of smart contract bug somewhere, and the dude, it's like there's 2,000 ETH, delicious ETHs ready to be eaten up. The dude's just gonna take half it and leave the other half in there. No, dude, they're gonna take all of it. Cut W says, just write your password on sticky notes. Just use analog, bro. Man, I don't think you saw this either in the chat last night, but somebody posted a particular infamous person's password for their, let's just say, a laptop that somebody lost in my in my chat last night, and it was a very funny password indeed. The Busco says, just take the dev pill, bro. I think most social engineering actually happens at an office. Yeah, and it doesn't have to be directly at the office, but they target. So like, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, but if you're trying to hack something at Apple, if you're trying to hack Apple software, you're going to go after Apple's employees, right?
Oh yeah, and there's so many ways to do it. You can do it on-prem, like he was talking about, in an office, but there's so many ways to do it online as well, right? If you're thinking about an office, then yeah, you can do the standard, like put a virus on a flash drive and drop it in the parking lot, see if someone plugs it in. You can do all of those types of attacks, or just if you're in where their computers are, just plug it into someone's computer. You could do that, right? But there's so many ways that you can get in, even just from anywhere in the world, right? There's websites you can go to where you can find hunter.io is one that a lot of people use. You can go there, and it's actually intended for marketers, but you can find out the email structure of like almost any organization. So for example, Apple, you could find out like, okay, what is like their structure of their email accounts, their usernames, right? Is it like first name dot last name, or is it like first initial dot last? It will tell you that. And if you know that, then you can go to LinkedIn. This is what's called open source intelligence gathering, OSINT. From there, you can just go to LinkedIn and see who works at Apple, and you'll know their usernames because you know what the structure is now. And you start building out a list. There's tools that will scrape LinkedIn for you, actually. It's where code comes into play too, right? You could maybe write your own as well. And you could just get a list of employees there, and then you can target them in a campaign.
I was muted. Touche. Max also says, remember, guys, big tech companies or tech companies that build big campuses literally promise things to the city councils that approve the project in the first place. Quote, economic growth, etc. City governments don't want remote. Yeah, and that's why I think the larger the company, it's like, especially over there in Silicon Valley, where Mr. Max Signitas works at, exactly the case. Bolasu says exactly what you said. Just go simple and leave a flash drive on the floor. Or get a.
Oh no! I guess I took over the stream now. I don't know how to run this thing though. Let's see. Get a clipboard and look like an elevator tech. Use a physical pen to get in. Oh, yeah, there you go.
Oh my God, I'm back. I went to the ethers. He said, or get a clipboard and look like an elevator tech and use physical pen to get in. Yeah, dude, go read Kevin Mitnick's go read all of Kevin Mitnick's books. You guys can see all like the crazy stuff that he did. He would go in places. He would call them on the phone. He would email them. He would mail them stuff in the mail. Like, he did all kinds of stuff, and it was crazy. Kyle says, leave a certain powder all over flash drive on the ground. You were talking about the Internet of Things. You were talking about the Internet of Things in this kind of work. Me or Ryan? Are you talking about that, Ryan?
I don't know, but some red teams will do, like when I used to work for an automobile manufacturing company, their red team actually went to some of the plants, and they just showed up with like the clipboard and the vest, right? And then everyone just assumed they worked there, and they could go wherever they wanted in the facility pretty much. And I think they had like Raspberry Pi devices they're planting in there, and all kinds of stuff, and just plugging into the server room and all that. And yeah, obviously, anytime you have physical access to anything, it's really trivial to take things over. Especially manufacturing plants and stuff like that. They're running Windows XP and old operating systems in many cases.
Dude, that whole part of it just seems so fun to me. Very James Bond-esque. MC says, crypto's crashing. I need to figure out this coding stuff quick. It ain't the only thing crashing, my friend. It ain't the only thing crashing. If you start social engineering attack within your company, do you tell your manager beforehand? I think that sounds like one of those emails that, or one of those like training things you have to take at a company. It's like, if someone does this, do you tell your manager beforehand?
Well, so with all that, it's like a big, like, it's an engagement, right? So they're gonna let you know beforehand that, hey, we're conducting this red team engagement. You're gonna be on it, and this is the scope and all of this stuff. And no one else other than you and like your manager or whatever, and the people on the red team. You guys are the only one that knows that this engagement's happening. They don't tell anyone else, even if they're on your team but not involved in red teaming. They like keep quiet about that because they don't want someone to like get the word out and then the defenders know, and then it kind of defeats the purpose because they know where you are, so they know where to look, and they're probably going to find you.
Yeah, we might have to actually, I'll say that for a different stream. All right, man. So do you have anything left to say to our lovely audience out there tonight?
Just learn to code, bro.
Just learn to code. Link in the description box below for doing just that. And yeah, guys, go ahead and subscribe to Rhino's channel if you haven't. He is a wealth of knowledge, just like myself. Ooh, but yeah, if his name is not tagged, or his channel is not tagged in the title, give it about 10 minutes, guys. Or if you're watching, you didn't watch the live stream, just watching the recording, it should be there. All right, everyone, that is all we have. So good night, and we'll see you guys later.